People tell me all the time, well, she does great at home, but she's so bad in public. Usually this means a stressed out, embarrassed owner and a stressed out, wacky acting dog. But it doesn't need to be that way. At the core, this is a rehearsal problem. So today, we'll look at how to design a training progression and circumvent the craziness. Ian here with Simpawtico Dog Training, and before we discuss progressions, please make sure you're subscribed so you never miss any of our videos. Also follow us on all the major social networks, and don't forget to check that YouTube description for notes, links, and resources for the stuff we talked about. Now, a training progression is a gradual transition made up of small, practical steps. Here, you see a nice gradient where easy phases into difficult, where low distraction phases into high distraction, where unskilled phases into skilled. This is the optimal training model. This ensures maximum confidence and stability in a variety of situations. However, most people do their dog training abruptly, like this. Or not even that, they'll just go straight for the drop kick, like this. What I see happening a lot is that owners rehearse very little, if at all, and then jump right into taking the show on the road. They start training in highly distracting environments, and predictably this leads to frustration and stress for both the dog and the owner. At this point, many owners start applying pressure. They start shouting and reprimanding, they buy prong collars and head halters, they pop and punish and try to force the compliance. This increases stress, and stress chemicals both impede learning, increase fatigue, and act as analgesics, painkillers, which render the pressure less effective. So then you have to apply more pressure, and then you get into this feedback loop of behavior and stress. Over time, this can lead to a whole host of well-documented problems, including dependency on the tools, generalized inhibition, residual stress, and even physical injuries. Nobody learns very well like that. You wouldn't tolerate a boss that did that to you, and you wouldn't tolerate a teacher or coach doing that to your child. You can short-circuit this whole scenario by just doing more work on the front end. Understand that when you change the picture, it takes time for the mind to adapt to a new scenario. We want to make changes gradually over time so that the adjustments are small. We help a dog understand how to adapt, help them identify what parts stay the same, and teach them to defer to us if they're unsure. That's hard too, because most people don't even really know what to do, which leads us to an inconvenient truth. Most owners need the practice as much as their dogs do. You've got to come at it the same way an athlete would. We don't teach people how to play basketball at the playoffs. First, they learn fundamental skills in a neutral environment. Here we focus on motor skills, muscle memory, and positive motivation. Then, as they improve, we add new layers such as working with teammates, playing against opposing teams, and then doing it in front of crowds. This is a training gradient. And truth be told, there are way more small steps in between that aren't even represented here. If dribbling was weak or layups were sloppy, for example, those pieces would be isolated and drilled until they were stronger. Only then would they be integrated back into the larger picture. Any musician, artist, or skilled professional will tell you the same thing. Actors learned it this way, surgeons learned it this way, even restaurant servers learned their jobs in a training progression in a gradient of successive benchmarks. As we've said, many dog owners skip this whole process. This is learning the game at the playoffs. This is learning to drive a car on the freeway. This is memorizing your lines on opening night. Remember, we want motor skills, muscle memory, and positive motivation. You only get those through support, encouragement, practice, and repetition. To help you start to visualize this, here's a basic skeleton for a training progression. Cultivate engagement and communication. Develop motor skills in a neutral environment. Practice for mastery and muscle memory. Layer on distractions and/or slowly change the environment. Reevaluate, then stick with your criteria, move it up or drop it down. Here are some sample progressions for you to take into consideration and to illustrate a couple of practical training gradients. Walking on leash, as we pointed out, is probably the most egregious example of gradient abuse. People tend to try and teach their dogs in the very environment they have to be a pro in. If you've followed along this far, you know that this is madness. First, we need to teach our dogs our communication system and to engage with us with energy. Training should be a fun, problem-solving exercise. Then, we need to teach the requisite skills in a neutral environment without squirrels, joggers, delivery men, or other dogs. Here is where we work out the kinks. We build muscle memory by getting all the mechanical elements correctly in place, and then we practice a bunch. This doesn't happen in an afternoon, this is a daily thing for several weeks. Next, we gradually layer on distractions. Then we move out onto the driveway for a while. Then onto the street in front of the house. Finally, when your dog is killing it, start taking the show on the road. If your dog struggles, you go back to a stage where they were more successful and work there for a little longer before attempting a more difficult level again. This not only helps your dog learn more completely what to do, but also any training aids you choose to integrate into your system, such as collars or leashes or halters, will be more effective with less effort. And then you can phase out the training aids instead of them being lifelong dependencies. We use similar progressions for a challenging behavior like sit for petting. First, we teach the individual motor skills in a neutral environment. The prerequisites are that the dog is already familiar with targeting sit and understands how to work on the leash. Then we assemble the components with a neutral, non-reactive helper. Adding a person is stimulating, so it would be madness to practice it with strangers. You need this to be someone who can just be quiet and still. Then you practice in new environments with new helpers. Then you ramp up the stakes. By now, it ought to be muscle memory, so you can start attempting this in other situations. You see how this works? It's gradual, it's small steps, and it builds in layers. If you try to take a new dog right out into the neighborhood without any rehearsal, without any practice, or without even introducing them to the expectations, you will run into problems. Don't blame your dog for that, it's your fault. Don't make excuses like, oh, she's a shepherd, or oh, he's a terrier, or oh, they're really stubborn. No, you're rushing it. You're forcing it, you're causing it. Dogs only know what we teach them. And remember, it's not pressure makes perfect, it's practice makes perfect. Now, if you're watching this and you're saying to yourself, wow, I really screwed up, it's not too late. If you're struggling with something, you can always drop back down and spend time in rehearsals. Break it down into manageable blocks and reteach. Get it looking good before moving up to a more difficult environment. Use this rule of thumb. Doing just okay? Keep practicing where you're at. Doing excellent? Make it harder. Struggling? Make it easier. All right, everyone. I hope this has helped you get thinking about how to design intelligent and effective training progressions. On our website, we have a list of sample training progressions for common behaviors. Check out our Learning Center for those and more training secrets, and we'll link to that in the description as well. Now, questions for you. What are some of the behaviors you're struggling with? And how has this video got you thinking about your progression redesign? Let me hear from you in those comments. In the meantime, don't forget to thumbs up this video, and as always, keep learning, keep practicing, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.